Okay. Hello, everybody. I think we have finally got things figured out. And we thought that because we've been so looking forward to this, that we would go ahead and do it. It will just mean it's a little bit later, but we'll still go for half an hour. And so I'm so pleased to be able to welcome Elaine Breckenridge to meet all of you this morning. As I mentioned already, she is a retired Episcopal priest living on Camano Island, just north of Seattle here. So I'm looking forward to meeting her in person, hopefully in the next couple of months. But I am very much looking forward to our discussion because I don't know about you, but I really love the posts that she does on God's Space on a regular basis. And so Elaine, do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Oh, sure. Finally. Thank you for having that conversation without me. You did a great job. Well, I guess the first thing to say is that I grew up in Utah, and my father was an Episcopal priest, and being in the church was really important to me. So I ended up going to seminary, and I was ordained when I was 29 years old. And I had a very full ministry of full-time, 32 years in the church. And then I retired in 2019. And as Christine said, I moved to Camano Island at that time. And I'm really fortunate to be on the island. Not only do I love it, but my adult children and grandchildren live on the island as well. So I am learning how to live in this new place and make connections and discern what I'm to do with the rest of my life, besides be a grandmother.
I think that, retirement always gives interesting transitions.
Yes.
And I know when Tom and I disconnected from I shouldn't say we disconnected from Mustard Seed Associates, because we're still involved with what Mustard Seed Associates became, which is Circlewood, that has the land that we used to own on Camano Island. But we're not involved in the same kind of way, and it was a transition going through, what does life look like after what I've been doing? And I'm still sometimes thinking that I'm trying to figure it out 5 years later or 6 years later or whatever it is. But Camano Island has a very special place in our hearts as well.
It does, yeah.
But then, the things that you enjoy writing and talking about too have a special place in our heart. And so I would like, tell us a little bit more about, your interest in, you can start with Celtic spirituality or rhythms and rituals. I don't care which, but,
okay,
the
sure.
common areas of interest that we have. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I'll just try to do a highlight, but I first became interested in Celtic spirituality in 2005. And I just read a couple of wonderful books at the recommendation of my spiritual director, whose name is Jane Comerford at that time, and one by John Philip Newell and another by Esther Duvall. And it got me so into it. And then I was really fortunate in 2007 to go to Ireland with Jane. And going to Ireland really made Celtic spirituality, jump off the book. And one of the things that made the biggest impression to me was going to a garden outside of Galway called Bridget's Garden. By any chance, have you been there, Christine?
No.
Well, it's a seasonal garden. And so there's the winter garden, the summer garden, and we would go in and meditate and just experience that garden. And I think that's what really brought me alive to think about the senses in a new way. And the winter garden featured a mound, a hill, a small hill. And as we looked at it, it was the figure of a woman lying on her side with her head on her shoulder. and we were told that's Bridget sleeping because
Oh,
it's winter. And I have always disliked winter. And so I began to think about, well, Bridget's asleep, nature is resting, there's this period of hibernation, and it's a time to, incubate seeds for the coming year. And so that first winter, I said, what would happen if I just lit candles and rested and stopped trying to do things that I usually do? And that's what started me on my journey. And now I have to tell you that winter's my favorite season.
oh,
Even
uh-huh.
it is because I've just developed winter rituals. And I
Mhm.
used to dread fall because it would make me realize that winter was coming soon.
Oh,
And
interesting.
now I love that whole idea of just watching the leaves fall, and just, it just brings me so much joy.
Mhm.
So that's where it really came from. And I had the opportunity of starting a Celtic Eucharist at one of the parishes where I was. And I had a collaboration with a whole group of people who helped make it possible. But we began observing the Celtic festivals,
Ah,
like
mhm.
Bridget's Day and, well, not Bridget's Day, but Imbolc and Samhain. Anyway, the 4 festivals. And so that's really was an important development as well. And then I always did solstice services. Um, and and then coming to Camano Island, I've had more time to be outdoors and really enjoy the 4 seasons.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I like I was not at all in favor of winter, particularly the first 2 winters I spent here in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah,
I really struggled a bit with it.
yeah,
But then I found, changing perspective. What I needed to do was not change place, but change perspective.
right.
And I started looking for what are the beautiful things about winter. And one of the things I love with the bare trees is looking at the beautiful shapes of the skeletons of the trees
Yeah,
and,
yeah,
and kind of focusing on that rather than on the things I don't like about winter,
right.
because I'm a hot weather person. I'm not a cold weather person.
Yeah,
So the weather sometimes got me down a bit, not so much the rain, because I don't mind walking in the rain. Um, and as long as I walked, no matter what the season, what the weather, it didn't bother me. But yeah, I've really gone, I can't say I've reached the point where winter is my favorite season, but I've certainly gotten to the point where I appreciate winter for the beauty of it.
hmm
Um, and, and I've incorporated other rituals into my life as well that are specific to the winter. And I mean, it is so um, enlivened my life and also increased my appreciation of the wonder of God's creation.
yes,
Um,
yes, definitely.
yeah,
hmm
and one of the things I think it was last year I did, we were up at Anacortes for a few days, and I was fascinated by the low-hanging sun, because it was the middle of winter. And we were right on a bluff that looked out over the water. So, I had a really good opportunity to appreciate it. And just since then, I thought, I I think winter in some ways, for me, has become a season for appreciating the changing effect of the light and the beauty of the sunsets and the sunrises that you get in a way that you really don't get at any other season. I
That's
don't
right.
think, you know.
What I love about winter on the island is that we tend to have more high tides,
Ah,
and we can have days where it actually looks like waves. It's not really the ocean, it's the sound, which is different. But I that is a thing to appreciate about winter here too.
mhm,
And that's something I've tried to learn more about, just the currents that dictate the life of the island. We have so many different interesting little bays that are all different in themselves. So it is good. It is good. And then just one other thing about seasons. I've been thinking about the seasons of the heart. And one of the things that I experienced this spring is that spring is usually a time when, I'm bursting with energy and I want to be outside and see things growing. But this spring, I fractured my elbow. And so I actually had a prolonged winter this year because I was forced to stay indoors and just really nurture and take care of myself. And so I was thinking about being a human being. We need to remember that sometimes the seasons of our lives or the seasons of our hearts may not be in sync with the seasons of the year. And in which case, I think it's best to follow the heart and not say, oh, I should be happy because it's summer. Well, but if you're grieving,
yeah,
give yourself permission to grieve.
well, that's very good advice. That's excellent advice. I mean, I've kind of had a prolonged winter too because of, the after effects of my sinus surgery and the terrible headaches I had, and the fact that I wasn't able to do anything much for several months as well. And it was like a bit like a prolonged winter. But but it was a very special season in other ways as well. And I think recognizing the specialness of those seasons when they're prolonged in ways that we hadn't anticipated, rather than fighting against them, because I think one of the things we tend to do sometimes is to try and fight against things that aren't quite the way that we wish they were.
Right.
But one of the things that you've mentioned to me too in the past is that you have sometimes had the chance to incorporate rituals and rhythms into the practices in the churches
yes,
been involved in. So
yes,
can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I think I was doing rituals sort of spontaneously as a form of pastoral care in the beginning, like, a couple decades ago, realizing that maybe an example would be a divorce. A person was having trouble struggling. And so I developed letting go rituals to help individuals do that. And it would be a liturgy, really. And then some kind of, usually, I think at that point, I did a lot with fire, burning slips of paper like you have done. But one of the fun things I could describe to you is in the season Celtic festival of Samhain, and that's the season of fall, which starts November 1st. One of the things that early Celtic people used to do is have bonfires. And part of that was they were eating up the stores. They would do the slaughter of the weak animals that weren't going to make it for the winter. And the word bonfire was literally the word bone fire, because they would burn the bones. And that was a ritual as well as a practical thing to do. And so it was using up what was left. And so one year when I was thinking about that, I thought, well, how would that translate perhaps as a ritual in one of the Celtic services? And then I realized, I opened up the sacristy cupboards. There's just all these dregs of candles, votive candles that weren't burned all the way through. And, I talked to the altar guild and they said, yeah, I'll do it. So I just gathered up all the leftovers of candles and put them in the circle on the floor, and it actually lit it all up, and it was like a bonfire. And so I kind of felt I had that connection with the church using up its stores, but also having a bonfire in a parish hall in the winter because we couldn't go outside in Spokane. And so I do that now in my personal life around Halloween time. I mean, sometimes I do it Halloween night. I always have little leftover candles. And so I burn that ritually, and it connects me back to that wonderful community in Spokane. But then I feel like I'm kind of doing what the ancients did in a more modern way. So that's one example I could share.
I love that. It's something, like you, I end up with all these little bits of candles. And then you don't know what on earth to do with them. I usually end up throwing them out, which I hate doing. Adding them to the landfill is terrible. But I love that idea. That is great. Yeah.
We could I'll take pictures, invite other people to do it on Halloween, and
Uh-huh.
because you can make it into a really pretty mandala, in your house somewhere with a candle. So that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good. I like.
And I can share one more if there's time.
Please, yes, plenty of time.
With the summer solstice, one of the things that the Celtic people used to do was they'd light the fires and they would drive the animals through two, fires. And part of it was to, burn away any ticks and things like that. That was something I learned. But also the fire, they would fan the smoke onto the crops. And that was a ritual to encourage the crops to grow. And so I thought, well, that's interesting. So one of the things I started doing, and do to this day, is at the summer solstice, is I burn last year's lavender sticks. And so what I would do in community is burning the lavender sticks was an opportunity for intercessory prayer. Let my prayer as incense rise before you. And I'd invite people to throw a lavender stick in the fire, praying for the world, themselves, and creation, something like that. And so that was another kind of ritual that connected me to the past.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I think I love the way that you've combined your own creativity with the rituals of the past, and you've reinterpreted them in a way that is appropriate for our world now and for your life now as well. And I think they're two things that all of us need to think of how we can do that,
In a way, it's kind of what St. Patrick did, that syncretism, where you take rituals or practices or thoughts of two different cultures. On top of my dresser behind me, I have a little elements altar. And lately, I used to have like some feathers and that symbolized air. And now I realize I have a fan going above my altar. And so I think of the fan, the electric ceiling fan, as symbolizing the element of air. And so I'm kind of bringing in, again, modern things that, and I have no trouble putting them side by side, something more elemental like a seashell.
Oh, I think it's important. I think one of the things that I'm increasingly concerned about is that if we cannot connect our faith to the world in which we live and to the everyday symbols around us, like the electric fan, I really like that, and things like that, then I mean, it's no wonder in a way that people are falling away from faith, because they haven't been helped to make these kind of connections. And so the faith that they've had has been really disconnected from the world in which they live. And, when they have struggles like the last couple of years have had for all of us, it's like there's nothing to hold on to. And so I think that this is what you're doing is just so terribly important, Elaine. It really is.
And in some ways, it's just a matter of thinking differently about something or reframing it. And one of the things I love about the island is the farmers markets, and we have a lot of farms here. And so people bringing the food, and in the summer of 2020, usually at the farmers markets booths, people would be kind of all crammed in, waiting to be helped. But because of social distancing, people were asked to stand 6 feet apart. And so there would be single lines coming from all these different booths. And I remember standing there and looking and thinking, it's like everyone's lined up to receive Holy Communion.
Oh, beautiful.
And I thought about that, and I just wrote something that I've never had a chance to incorporate somewhere. I said, how beautiful it is here in this community that people come together to receive their sacrament, homegrown food and products. In doing so, we support the local farmers and we support our health with fine fruits and vegetables. And it's inspiring to see all ages come together for the common purpose of feeding and caring for one another and becoming a sustainable community. It is not unlike the ancient Celtic and Benedictine monasteries, the sharing of the sacraments of the earth, and our stewardship of support for the people who grow and make the products. And then I went on to say, perhaps the church is called to be in a better collaboration with its, local communities in that way. And that might be one way to think about following Jesus locally. So.
I like that. I think that is beautiful. It really is beautiful. And recognizing those kinds of not just moments, but those kinds of connections is just, I think it's something that we desperately need.
Yeah.
We need for ourselves and we need for others to help them as well. And it's just so incredibly important. And
in many ways, I wish that Holy Communion, it's so aligned with the idea of the Last Supper, but the feeding of the 5,000, I think, needs to be celebrated with Eucharist as well, in terms of the symbol.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I mean, I think that, we've kind of, in a way, truncated the Eucharist because we only associate it with the Last Supper. But I think associating it with these other kind of events of Jesus, providing, I think would be a lovely kind of extension of the use of the Holy Eucharist, and the use in blessing are one of the things I love is that I think they only did it 1 year, but a couple of priests went up to the local zoo and got permission to bless the animals.
Oh, great. Hope they did it on St. Francis Day.
Yeah, it was St. Francis Day. And to do it as a part of, and to offer communion to people that wanted it as well. And I think not only a neat idea, but something, and I think, how many people would be more drawn to things of faith if they had these kinds of experiences to connect them, and what you're talking about too. Or we're learned, with the farmers market example, it's not even as though you need to stand there and say, hey, guess what? This is like Holy Communion. But helping people, maybe just helping people within church to recognize these connections, I think would be a much more meaningful kind of experience for many of them. Well, we are running out of time. I'm so glad, Elaine, that this happened. And I read out at the, in the one where I thought when I couldn't figure out what on earth was going on, we learned, for those of you that don't know, we learned that if you get disconnected from a Zoom meeting when you're on Facebook Live, you cannot get back on to the Facebook Live session. This is what we learned today, a special meeting. So for another time, we will not be fooled by this.
I won't make the mistake. I closed a box I shouldn't have. It was my fault.
Oh, it's okay. As I told Elaine before we started, these are meant to be informal discussions. This was just a little more informal than we'd anticipated. So, but I'm going to finish with this blessing again. I did read it before, but I bless, it's a morning offering. And it is morning here in Seattle and on Camino Island, though I know some of you that are watching it, it's not morning, but I bless the night that nourished my heart, to set the ghosts of longing free into the flow and figure of dream that went to harvest from the dark, bread for the hunger no one sees. All that is eternal in me welcomes the wonder of this day. The field of brightness it creates, offering time for each thing to arise and illuminate. I place on the altar of dawn the quiet loyalty of breath, the tent of thought where I shelter, waves of desire I am sure to, and all beauty drawn to the eye. May my mind come alive today to the invisible geography that invites me to new frontiers, to break the dead shell of yesterdays, to risk being disturbed and changed. May I have the courage today to live the life that I would love, to postpone my dream no longer, but do at last what I came here for and waste my heart on fear no more. I love that. And particularly all that is eternal in me welcomes the wonder of this day. And it does, and the wonder of the seasons and of all that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
So thank you, Elaine, and thank you for those that endured through all the mishaps that we had this morning. Those that didn't, of course, you can still see it, as you know, on YouTube, and we will be back in a couple of weeks. I'm not quite sure who I will be talking to, but somebody, probably Lily, but we just haven't confirmed that at the moment. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and goodbye.
Bye.